Riot police have detained over 1,000 protesters in Moscow. Authorities declared the demonstration illegal even before it started. The protesters are demanding that opposition candidates be allowed to run for city-wide elections. CGTN's Julia Chapman explains more from the Russian capital.
Well, I'm here in central Moscow. Standing behind me are members of Russia's National Guard who are here to deter protesters from gathering. They've been gathering over the course of the day in central Moscow, starting outside City Hall, where they were gathering to make their opposition known to opposition figures not being allowed to run in local elections that are coming up later this year. A number of would-be candidates had put themselves forward, had gathered signatures, only to be told by the Electoral Commission that their candidacy would not be allowed. They wouldn't be on the ballot paper for those elections. And so people have been gathering here in Moscow. The authorities put the official estimate at around 3,500 people. Others say that that's a conservative estimate. There have been a number of detentions in their hundreds, and people here are gathering again later today. They have been arresting opposition figures, including those who were trying to run in these upcoming local elections. They've released them now towards the end of the day, now that the main protests have died down in the city center. But the authorities have been very much clamping down on today's protests. We heard from Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin this morning ahead of the protest. He said that he didn't want protesters to gather. He said that it would not achieve anything, that protests, that disorder and ultimatums were not the way to get things done. So he was very much discouraging people from gathering here in Moscow today. They've done so anyway. It's very difficult to know how many, in fact, were gathering because they were being detained very quickly and not being allowed to protest outside City Hall. Here's what some of them had to say earlier.
It's not just that the police are acting inadequately. They enjoy harassing common citizens.
I was arrested. I call on Muscovites to come and gather, maybe even with tents. But peaceful protest in Russia doesn't stand a chance. It doesn't work.
So protesters very much unhappy with how this has been handled today, with the heavy-handedness, as they see it, of the authorities. But they're still gathering despite that opposition to them, despite the heavy hand from the authorities. They say that they still want to hear from their opposition candidates. They think they should be allowed to run in the local elections coming up this September. Julia Chapman, CGTN, Moscow.